Hi everyone, it's Danny. Alrighty, so one of the questions that I get asked quite a lot of times is what to do with an orchid after the blooms fall. So if you just purchased yourself an orchid or you have just received an orchid, this video is for you. We're gonna take the most popular orchids, including the Phalaenopsis orchids, Dendrobiums, Oncidiums, and Cattleya orchids, and see what to do with them after the flowers are gone. I would like to start by saying that if your orchid loses its flowers after a while of being in bloom, it doesn't mean your orchid will die. And with a bit of knowledge, you can make your orchid rebloom the following season. So let's start with Phalaenopsis orchids. They will usually stay in bloom for a few months, maybe 3 months, sometimes even more, but at some point they will eventually lose their flowers. So after a while, from a beautiful flower spike full of flowers, you'll end up having a bare flower spike, maybe with a single tiny flower about to fall, and then you will just be left with the bare flower spike. So at this point, it is time to think about cutting the bare flower spike. Now, Phalaenopsis orchids are pretty special orchids, in the sense that they can actually rebloom from the same flower spike. It doesn't happen in all cases, but in some cases, especially with the complex hybrids you can find in stores and grocery shops, it can happen. Now, because this is a longer discussion, I'll add a link somewhere here that you can click, also in the description of this video, with a tutorial that shows you the different ways in which you can cut a flower spike, depending what you want. As a general rule, cutting a flower spike above a node might produce another secondary spike, so you can have a few more months with flowers. There is also the option to cut the flower spike from the base, but you will learn more in that tutorial how it is best depending on your situation. So you can pause this video now, check out the link that I showed you here so you know how to cut a flower spike, and then come back to see what else we need to do with our orchid. So let's say that our flower spike has dried up completely, or we just decided to cut the flower spike from the base or from above a node. No matter what we decide to do, our orchid will actually start to grow. What I mean by this is that it will start to produce new leaves from the crown. And hopefully you can see here, I have a tiny new little leaf that is just sprouting. Phalaenopsis orchids usually produce 1 to 3 new leaves per year. This is part of their regeneration process. They produce new leaves from the crown of the orchid, and gradually, in time, they will lose some of the leaves from the bottom. So if your orchid is starting to lose 2 leaves from each side from the bottom, don't panic. This is really normal. It is just rejuvenating and regenerating itself. You might also start to notice that your orchid is starting to grow new roots from the top as well as from the inside of the pot. Again, this is a natural process. Phalaenopsis orchids, before they can rebloom, need to grow new leaves and new roots. So usually, after your orchid is done blooming, it will start to grow new leaves and new roots, and what you need to do is offer the best conditions you can provide and care for the orchid as best as you can. Now, I do have a tutorial on how to care for Phalaenopsis orchids. It is a pretty lengthy discussion, but I will add a link somewhere here and also in the description of this video so you know what type of light you should provide, when you need to water the orchid, and so on. So practically, this will be the guide for you to know how to care for the orchid while it is not in bloom. It is also a good idea to repot new orchids because the media they come in might be broken down or might have pests. My personal preference is to repot any new orchid. I like to buy fresh media so I know it does not have any pests, any molds, any problems, and so on. Also, I can switch the pot. If the orchid is too big for the initial pot, I can go one size bigger. I can also reuse the same pot it came with. Also, I like to make extra ventilation holes, and if you watch the video about how to care for Phalaenopsis orchids, you'll find the reason why I make the extra ventilation holes. You'll also learn why I like to use bark chips and this type of media for this orchid. So practically, after the orchid is done blooming, but before it starts to create new leaves and new roots, I like to repot it. I like to give it a fresh start. This way I can check the root system and the overall health of the orchid. I also have a repotting tutorial for Phalaenopsis orchids, and I can show you step by step how I actually repot Phalaenopsis orchids. So I will share the link towards that video somewhere here and also in the description of this video. If you want to check that out, just visit the description or click on the link right here. Now here comes the fun part. With good care all year round, usually in the fall, the Phalaenopsis orchid will start to produce a brand new flower spike full of buds. the flower spikes will emerge from between the leaves. They will grow and actually produce quite a lot of beautiful blooms once again for you. And pretty much the process repeats itself. All you need to do now is just enjoy the beautiful blooms and repeat the care process just like you did before. Okay, now let's presume you are dealing with an Oncidium orchid or just another orchid that has pseudobulbs of this type. Now, once the flower spike dries up from this type of orchid, in most cases, it will not rebloom or create secondary spikes. So in this case, we need to cut the flower spike from the base, just like so. When cutting flower spikes, be sure to sterilize your cutting tools. I sterilized the scissors with alcohol prior to cutting the flower spike. This will actually help prevent spreading disease and infections. Oncidium orchids, or orchids who produce pseudobulbs like this, will start to go into their growing mode just like the Phalaenopsis orchid. But this time it's going to be a little bit different. Instead of producing leaves from the top of each pseudobulb, what this orchid will do is start to create new little plantlets from the base of each pseudobulb. This is actually the growth pattern of this orchid. The old pseudobulbs will now rebloom again, but they will serve as water and nutrient deposits for the new growth. This new growth right here will take up to 9 months or so to mature and become a pseudobulb like this. So during this time, it is your duty to maintain this orchid happy and healthy. I do have a tutorial on how to care for Oncidium type orchids as well. I will add an annotation right here that you can click. Also, I will add a link in the description of this video which explains how to care for Oncidium type orchids. They're a bit different from Phalaenopsis orchids, so if you don't know how to care for them, you can click these links and learn. Now, after the pseudobulb will mature, comes the fun part. With good care all year long, it will start to produce another flower spike right from next to the bulb and the first leaf. The flower spike will grow, create buds, and will bloom once again for you. So at this point, it is time to repeat the process once again. With Dendrobium Phalaenopsis orchids, things are pretty much the same as with the Oncidium orchid. When the flower spike will start to lose its flowers and start to dry, you can cut it close to the base. This flower spike will now rebloom again, nor will it create secondary spikes. However, this old cane can produce another flower spike next season for you, so you can cut the flower spike but never cut the cane. In the growing season, after the blooms are done, this orchid will start to produce a brand new cane, usually from the base of the mother cane, which will grow and mature, and in about 9 months, with good care, it will produce a flower spike of its own. Also, the old cane can bloom once again, so you can have multiple flower spikes from this type of orchid. Now, this type of orchid really likes bright, diffuse light. It also likes warm temperatures, and it likes to be watered when the media is dry or almost completely dry. Cattleya orchids will not rebloom from the same flower spike again either, so when the flowers are all spent, you can cut the flower spike close to the base of the pseudobulb as possible. However, even though this cane cannot rebloom again, don't cut the cane. It will serve as water and nutrient deposit for the new growth. So after the flower spikes are spent, usually a Cattleya orchid will start to grow a brand new pseudobulb from the base of the mother pseudobulb. This again can take a few months to mature, and with good care, depending on your hybrid or variety, it can rebloom from the top once again. I do have a care tutorial for this orchid as well, so I will add an annotation right here that you can click. Also, in the description below, you can find a link, so if you want to learn how to care for a Cattleya orchid all year round, you can visit that link and learn. So as you can see, orchids can actually flourish and rebloom for you if you have a bit of knowledge about how you should care for them. In no way should you throw away your orchid just because it is done blooming. If you still have questions or you didn't understand something, just leave me a comment down below and I will get back to you and answer your questions or lead you to different tutorials that will explain how to do certain stuff. So alrighty, if you'd like to see more videos and more tutorials from me, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post daily. Also, if you have questions about this topic or other topics related to orchids, feel free to leave me a comment down below and I'll get back to you. And also, you can visit my website orchidnature.com, where you can find care sheets, identification sheets, and forums for orchids. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye!